All right, yeah, I see it up there now. Okay, all right, I'll call the meeting to order at 4:04 PM on the Zoom lookup. Looks like all the board members are here, plus Glenda and Roger. We'll have the approval of the minutes of the May 5th, 2020 meeting. Someone might make a motion that they be approved, or any corrections or additions or amendments.
I'll make a motion, we approve the minutes of the May 5th meeting.
Have a
I'll
second?
second it.
All right. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All right.
Aye.
Let's move into the budget workshop, Roger. And
Okay,
tell us where you want to go, revenue projections?
yes, sir. Hey, Blair, if you don't mind, send Greg Northcutt the same link that you just sent Paul Ambler. And go ahead and fire that PowerPoint presentation up and put it on slide number 2. All right, so I think we'll just get started. Hopefully everybody can see that, or if maybe have printed out copies of the budget presentation here. And before we get started, Bill had asked the question about the headings on the columns and how the layout of the forms are. And so I'd like to answer that. And what we have throughout, most of the tables, we're looking at three different things. The first thing is the budget as it was approved for the current fiscal year, and that would be the first 2 columns there following the description and the total. And the next thing that we look at is through the progression of the year, we look at what the operating results are. So we've got operating results documented through April, and we took those and use those to project on how we think we're going to end up the year. And that's the column heading that's titled Projected for the Year Ending 2020. And then I've got the next couple of columns is the projected excess or deficiency, comparing the budgeted amount to what we're actually trying to project here. And so the last 3 columns on most of the tables are what we're going to request or trying to request in the draft budget for the year ending 2021. So that's the structure of how we look at it. We start with how we're approved right now, how we're performing, look at the deviations, and I use that information to try to project what we're going to need to operate the following year. That with other information that pertains to any changes that we have in any of the expense categories. So,
Roger, thank you. I think that makes sense. For example, on the first line, operating revenue, it looks like what we project or what we budgeted for to make, we're short 87,400 of probably what we will make for the fiscal year. Is that how I interpret that?
yes, sir.
Okay, I'm good. Thank you.
So I'd sent over a little bit of a management discussion to try to hit the high points, and I'll go through these tables here. I don't know that we'll talk about every line, but if anybody has a question about any of these numbers, be sure to ask as we're going through the numbers, and then we're going to try to sum it all up down here later in the presentation. So looking at the revenue projections, it's a very difficult year, and I don't I don't know if there's any science at all that we can look at here that's going to accurately project what kind of revenues we're going to have. We're hearing mixed things in our business community about what their orders are looking like. And so that said, the way I looked at this, I tried to go back and take a look at some consumption trends amongst our 10 biggest customers, and I built some spreadsheets and looked at that and just see what kind of variations that we could see. And I saw a lot of variation on the individual basis, but maybe not as pronounced when you combined all the flows together. And I tried to use that information together to judge some consumption comparisons between what we budgeted on last year, what we're seeing this year on the dashboard reports, and then, you know, what we might expect in next year, and used it as a subjective basis to come up with what our operating revenues might be. So as you can see there, our projections are going to fall short of what we originally budgeted. We were running pretty good, but the last couple of billing periods we've slowed down, and I would attribute that probably to what we're seeing here with the COVID-19 virus, and I'm sure there's probably more to come. But right now we're projecting a shortfall at the end of the year on operating revenue of about 87,400 on a combined basis, and you can kind of see how that shakes out between what was projected for the water and the sewer in the table.
Are you
So-
seeing are you seeing a significant then reduction in the restaurants?
Oh, yes, yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
so that's probably where a lot of that is.
There he is. I mean, Cracker Barrel, for example, you know, he historically uses probably 25, 30,000 gallons a day, and they're down to like 2,000 gallons a day, or
Yeah.
1,000, just almost not running any water at all. So the commercial entities, the hotels, the restaurants, all of those type entities, their usage is down severely. We got one of our largest users appears to me to be pretty much offline or production only running halfway, and that's Westlake. They don't look like they're really running very hard, or they're not using our water. So Arkema, their demand's held up pretty well through this, and the other plants have as well. Although there is some noticeable lower consumption, presumably probably because they have some of their staff away from the facility. You know, outside of Arkema and Westlake, most of the folks that are using our water are using it for domestic purposes. So trying to look at it, just some things looking at the water revenues next year. We're actually going to end up, you know, our estimate is they're going to be lower than what we're projecting this year. And that's even factoring in a similar increase at mid-year is what we've been seeing, around 3%. And also I added in another revenue source, an assumption that we could get passage on that $4 fee there around January 1st to help us with those costs of those AMI AMR meter replacement program. Something else that I really anticipate, and I made mention of it in that letter, is once we put these new meters in, you're going to start billing more usage. It was very noticeable on this last job when we went into the Heights Phase 4, and we captured a lot of water, you know, in those residences that we were missing. I haven't charted that, but I just, as a rule of thumb, know by looking at the billing register every month as we upload and download the handheld, you can see that kind of thing. On the sewer side of it, you know, essentially calling it a flat year for all practical purposes, and that assumes the increase, you know, that we would have mid-year too. You know, again, we got to be careful with that because we really don't know how that's going to run, but we suspect we're going to get into a period of inflation here, probably a little bit wilder than what we've seen over the last 10 years or so. So going down the line, I probably got overly eager on tap fees, but I left it that way. You know, right now we're projecting $7,000 this year with tap fees. We believe that the banks are going to keep the rates low, so we think that maybe we can add some more customers to the system. On the other operating revenue there, that's primarily the flows in from a couple of the industrial facilities, Waste Path being the primary one, and then I've added the numbers for the new customer, Trimac Industries, in there as what we think that they're going to flow us at our rates, and as adjusted mid-year. So
I
we're
was
not
wondering, Roger,
Yes,
it was just on the sewer tap fee, the $5,000 increase
yeah,
from projected.
yeah.
Is that Trimac?
Well, Trimac, no, Trimac already had a tap at their facility, so not there. I'll show you in a minute where Trimac is going to contribute some capital to us to help us upgrade lift station.
So isn't the 6,000 rather optimistic then on that line item?
Yeah, I would say it probably is. I would
Okay.
probably say it is, but again, I think my point is that with the interest rates low, we do see some construction. I'll give you for example, and what makes me think that way. But Danny Greenfield bought a tract from the Doucet guy or family there along 7th Avenue. So I think he's got 4 or 5 lots he's planning on developing there. I've had discussions with him, and I've had some other discussions. So, with low interest rates, got some people moving, trying to do some development. It could happen. So the reality of that is we don't get it. Those tap fees really only cover the cost of materials and stuff anyway. It's not a tremendous amount of money. It's right at $1,000 per tap. So
Yeah.
I would suggest you could leave it there, and if we miss, we miss. We haven't seen it that high lately, but I don't know. I've got a sense that maybe we'll pick up some development this year. We certainly got some pent-up demand, and hopefully it will occur. So.
Okay.
Hey, Roger, is there any movement on that across from Love's?
Sure, yeah, and they're gonna, actually, I didn't put that in there. I expect them possibly to be paying us before the end of this fiscal year, but they have they've got a tap fee, plus they've got an assessment because they're part of the US 62 sewer system, and we calculated that assessment for them based on the land use they're proposing. We got a schedule for all those US 62 sewers, so that's essentially how that interceptor was funded. The water board took out a loan and built an assessment schedule based on flow contribution to kind of split that cost out amongst those that benefited. So Calvert Water really acted as the developer case. And then all the people connecting or recompensate the city for that outflow of cash. So going down the list there, some of these other revenue items and rental income, that's for the plant that we rent the rail services over there for the industrial treatment. The next item, hydrant fees, John and I have talked about that we're going to try to do these hydrants this year. If we do, we're not going to run those hydrants every year. I think every other year is fine. And I don't know, we'll probably be looking at that item. I don't want to try to set that up, 2 years in a row. So John, I'll get with that. Take a look at it. It just depends on where we're at and whether or not we can do it. Silas is wanting to try to get it done, but I'm not sure that we've got enough time to get it done by the end of the fiscal year. My gut tells me that we probably don't. So we may have to split some of that over. The disconnect fees there based on historical numbers, just we took the projections and assumed that would stay similar this next year. The reality of it is if we approve electronic payment, I would suspect that may go down as well. The next item, miscellaneous revenue, I'm hydrant meters and things of that nature. I think maybe I'm not necessarily sure exactly what goes in there. I just left it. in line with what we've historically been. Of course, last year, that miscellaneous revenue item included that the compensation for all the flood activities that we had within the system. And then the final item, penalties, and that's just really based on all there. And again, on putting an electronic payment system in, those may go down too. I'm not sure how that's gonna run, but at the end of the day, we're projecting the revenue. Yeah, projecting a revenue of 1,417,500 for the water system and around 600 there, for the sewer system, totaling up just at around 2,037,000. Last year, you can see that we were projecting quite a bit more revenue. This year, we're saying that we're gonna end up a little bit higher than what we're saying there. Again, I'm a little bit nervous about it, and one of those things that I think you're going to have to monitor that closely on a month-by-month basis and be cautious about that, because really none of us know what's going to happen here. Everything you open up is negative, and there's not much positive out there in the world. So we'll just have to wait and see how it goes. Does anybody have any questions or comments on the revenue projection?
It looks reasonable based on past years. What you've chosen, like you say, we're in a different time, and I'm sure we're going to have this discussion before the day's over, is what adjustments do you make if in fact all these, water and sewer revenues go down, if they go down drastically. But
Sure.
we don't have to hit that yet, but based on if it was a normal year, it looks great. Roger, good job.
Yeah, I mean, you got to have contingency plans, and we can talk about that here in a minute. So from there, I try to group our expenses into 3 categories here primarily. And so the first category I want to talk about is personnel expenses. And for this budget preparation, as we got started, I think John had been talking to the mayor, and Glenda was involved in this. Glenda prepared a spreadsheet that basically itemized out the hourly wages and salaries for everybody that's staffed in the system. And so the consideration in the budget was for a COLA, a cost of living adjustment of 2.3%. In this budget. So that is where a lot of these numbers got derived at. You're going to see the projections for the year quite a bit less. We were down below the staffing levels that we're at right now for the majority of the year. There was a good part of the early part of the year that I think we were down 1 clerk, and and I know on the operations side, we just recently added 2 operators, one an apprentice and the other a trainee in early February, I believe. So those have increased expenses, not only in the salary and hourly rates, but also down the line in the benefits as well. So those are things that we need to talk about. I as a board, I remember we had some discussions. We had the money in the budget for this year, and I think most folks understood that we were trying to load up for the future, because we do have some pending retirements here. I haven't nailed down any dates, but they're probably within a year at max, and maybe sooner than that. So trying to get people certified and up to speed. But we'll have some more discussion on that as we go. But as you look down the roles here, we tried to be pretty conservative. I just took Linda's numbers, and on the hourly rates and salaries, I did try to build in the step increases that we've agreed to. If y'all remember, when we put Silas in the supervisor position, we put several milestones for him to hit. And as he hit them, he got corresponding pay increases. So he's done several of those. I expect he'll accomplish more of those this year. the apprentice program was set up the same way. It had milestones with step increases as the milestones were successfully completed. And then the rest of the operators have the ability to increase their pay through obtaining a higher level of certification. So those things considered, that's what drove the numbers that you see in these rows here. The office payroll cost is the water and sewer share of the clerk's expense in the office there. And I'm not sure exactly. I think that's derived 50-50 on the deputy clerks, if I'm not mistaken. And I don't know, Glenda, do you remember how that's all set up? She's muted off, so.
That's correct, Roger.
Okay.
It is 50.
It's 50% of the deputy clerk's pay, right?
And me.
Okay, and you, so 50% of the clerk treasurer and deputy clerks is that number there. So going down to salaried employees, that's my salary. That's what we pay. Greg's hourly rates are included in that based on what we project that he will bill in a given year. And it's got the board's salaries in the salary on the 105 account. So 110's the hourly employees just based on the staffing level that we've got right now. And then 111's the hourly employee overtime. Silas is basically an hourly employee right now. He's not a salary. So he works out in the field primarily, and that's just where he's at. The least employee expense was from last year, and we really not allocated any for a least employee this year. So just trying to cut our expenses down the best we can. The next line's the county employee retirement system contributions based on what the board has instructed us that we'll have to contribute this year. It's around 24% of employee salary. And it was originally scheduled to be higher than that, but I believe the legislature passed a bill where they locked it up at some maximum rate compared to this last year, if not the rate that was paid during the last year. But that continues. That program's in trouble, and that's one of the things that hopefully the local governments are going to be able to help get the legislature to help fix that here before it gets way too far out of hand. The next line's the health insurance. You can see it's a big cost. And it continues to be and has been. So
Question
Yes.
The retirement number, is that just on the water department people, or does that include the payroll office or the office payroll?
The calculation shown there for retirement under that line is just for your operations and administrative staff. To my knowledge, the office payroll cost up above and 104 has probably got that component in it, but it's just, it's calculated on the city's ledger, and they just bill half of that off for the water department to pay.
That's
Okay.
correct.
Yeah. So your next line's your health insurance. And Glenda, what kind of increase did we have any? What was the percent increase this year?
It was actually a negative 0.62. I mean, it wasn't very much, but it was a little bit of a decrease. The increase was where the deductible increased. So it increased $100 for a single and $200 for family.
Okay, and our increased costs that we see, that it's reflective of adding the new employees in their plans, basically on the line items. And it's what you're saying. So that's the primary issue right there. Assuming there's no changes in the plan, that's how that number was derived. Going down to line 127, the disability insurance, that's based on the estimates given to us by the carrier. 130 Social Security, as y'all know, that's just a standard percentage of the employee's pay. And then workers' compensation insurance is based on what the carrier had advised us it was going to be. Is the unemployment insurance is the same as the way those are calculated. So when you start looking down the list there. You look at your budget request for FY 2021 and so on the water side of it, around 640,000, around sewer side, 300,000. And you can see it at 942,000, and that reflects, roughly a $30,000 increase over what was approved in the budget last year. What we're projecting, though, you can see is significantly less, and I think that's reflective of the partial staffing levels that we've had this year. One of the things that seems that's kind of hard to control at times, but this year I believe we may have, well, we've struggled probably less than we have, but I can tell you the budget year last year, we tried to really lower the overtime component here. And I think you can see in this budget, we overran it about 10,000. That's probably reflective of the fact that we were lightly staffed in one area or two, and it probably cost us some overtime, but we're going to try to hold that overtime where it is and trying to reduce it more. It feels like we're been better able to do it. We were doing real good. We've had to ramp some of it up with this COVID-19 stuff, and we're tracking it in case they open up the opportunity to apply for some of the extra costs, extra experiencing on that. So that's, personnel expenses are a huge component of what we do. And, I would say that they're a huge component of what the city does. That's the largest component of our expense of running an operation. And down the road, that's something that, as costs continue to increase, that we want to have to deal with, so. Does anybody got any question about those items? So if not, let's move on to the next category, which is professional services and commodity expense. And again, I tried to keep this budget as lean as we possibly can, knowing what we're going to get into. Now, I left some money in here under the legal part of it. I debated about whether to cut it out or not. The legal part is really only in there if we need to seek outside legal expertise in an area that maybe Greg's not as versed in or not comfortable in representing us in, and that's what that line item is. And most recently, we've used that to deal with agreed order issues on the wastewater side of that. You can see, though, this year we've not had to tap into that. I left it in there because we're getting near to the end of our agreed order, and I assume that we may need to have some legal assistance if we need to do some negotiations there. I do know that we're going to try to reopen our permit and change our monitoring point down towards the river from the plant. And we believe that's the best thing to do to try to rectify our E. coli compliance issues we've been having. So that said, that item right there, if we needed to go cutting on, we could probably cut on that. The next item's the audit. And on the audit, I took and projected up an increase from the last year, a moderate increase. And that's how I developed that budget for that. So I do see what appears to be an issue on the cost there. Glenda, I'm gonna have to ask you about that. I took the budget from last year. I think I've got that audit expense projected for 2022 high. I'm projecting it to be $26,000. I think that's too much money. I don't think they're going to be much over that 19,700, are they?
I would think that's probably too much.
Yeah.
I would have to look, but I don't think.
I'm pretty sure in line. Last year we budgeted 18,800. This year, just an incremental increase. I think we'll be all right there. The next line item, we've started to ramp up some cost on it, and that's the testing deal. And we're gonna put a procurement spec out and try to bid our testing work. We have not historically done that. That's testing is somewhat, as a professional service more so than a commodity. And, but we're gonna try to see if we can't get some folks interested in getting their pricing right from us. We've drifted and seen quite a bit of increase in that area. The next, yes,
Those line items, are they off a little bit out of sync?
they are, and I noticed that. I just said the next item was the testing. It's actually chemicals. I'm sorry about that. That's what it is.
Okay.
So the chemicals have increased, and the primary deal with the chemical increase has been due to the peracetic acid. And that's a little bit higher dollar on the chemical, but it's a whole lot lower dollar on the dealing with the safety of it and the aspects. Is, you know, when you weigh it, ultimately, it's going to be probably a lot more cost effective for us in the long run. But I computed peracetic acid to be the only one used at the wastewater plant, and then at the water plant, it's going to be chlorine, hydrofluorosilicic acid, and hypochlorite. So I'm sorry that next item where water is projected at 12,000, sewer at 22,000, total cost 34,000 is the testing element.
Okay.
The next line item is for easements, and really that's for our railroad crossing permits, and we've got annual fees that we pay for those permits, and really what they use those fees for is to cover their insurance for those crossings underneath the tracks, and that's what that one.
That's an annual 5,000.
Well, I'm getting, yeah, that 5,000 on the water side. That 2,500 and that 2,500 is for miscellaneous engineering expenses. That's another one of those that we've historically had, but you can see we didn't use much of that this year. So we wanted to do some cutting. We could probably cut there. I'm gonna put asterisks on everything that I see in here that we can work on if we need to cut some. But then that easement expense, that's said, that's about the best I can do on that. The next one was IT services, and IT service costs is really, you know, projected out of what we've been experiencing here recently. I'm not sure where it gets billed to, but we've got that GPS tracking system on our service vehicles, and I'm looking at eliminating that. I'm just, to be frank about it, here recently, we've not used it. And the work order systems we've gone to, we're using iPads and Droid tablets, and they have tracking features on them. So, you know, we can tell where somebody's been at. They're not completely foolproof, but if we need to know, we can tell. So the training and licensing budget is just projected off of this current year's expenses at $4,000. They may increase those, I don't know. The next line item is the safety expense at $5,300, and again, trying to project it from what we've got here. I know the city is going to get into procurement for uniforms, and we'll participate in that with the city on that, with the hopes of coming up with something different for our uniforms. We're not been really happy with that service, so I think I got offline again somehow or another.
No, you're all right.
Yeah, one of those. I apologize for that. I'm gonna tell you, PowerPoint is a bear on tables. It's and I'm sure some of it's a user error, but it's hard to keep the tables all lined up. So,
Your next one is
say-
227.
Yeah, the safety numbers is quite a bit higher. It's the number that totals 21,500, and that includes that uniform expense in there. We pay probably $270 to $300 a month for uniforms, if I'm not mistaken. It's just a lot of money.
That didn't sound right. I think safety's a line that has the budget item of 5,300, isn't it? Utility and power and gas? Which one is it?
No, it's
It's
training licenses.
210.
5,300 is training and licenses, and the 4,000 numbers for travel. And that goes with most of the training that's done outside of Calvert City. That's for lodging and meals and that kind of stuff per diem.
So you're saying safety is going to be 21,500 this year? Okay.
Yeah. So in the safety, you've got several things that roll into that. You've got our training, our employee safety training for our consultant, which I feel like we get a pretty good deal on it. And we got safety boots and we got uniforms and safety equipment, traffic control devices, those kind of things. All of that comes out of that line item, and that's why it's as high as it is. It's just prorated from the previous. Again, John and I have talked about procurement of uniforms, and we believe that we will be pursuing a new procurement here this summer. We've even talked about maybe acquiring the uniforms and having employees wash them, but we're going to talk about that some more before we try to make any decisions on that. But the next item there is the big one. It's power and gas utilities, and just trying to project it off of last year's expense. And Glenda contacted both of our power utilities, and they're not looking at any increases to their knowledge at this point in time. Next line items for communication, and that's for all of our data. And it also includes our telemetry for our lift stations that we've got set up on the guard dog system. And that number basically was projected off of what we had last time. But I did reduce it some to reflect eliminating that GPS off of the vehicles. The next one is equipment rental and storage, and that's always kind of an assumed value. This year, we're only projecting $2,000 of expense with that. That's another item that, subjectively we could look at, but, it just varies from year to year. You never know when you're going to need it. It's kind of a contingency item. Then we jump down to distribution model and GIS support, and I just put that at $1,500, kind of a minimal amount in case we need somebody to help us load in some data into our GIS. This year, we've not incurred any expense for that. I would tell you back under communications, I think that's where we also pay for our work order management software and our GIS system. Then we get down to the property and liability insurance. It was the final item. So it's nothing to sneeze about. It's $43,000, but we didn't really, I don't think we got notified of a very large increase this time, did we, Glenda?
I do not actually have those numbers yet, but I did speak with Howard Rosewell, and he said that we would not be having, it would not be changing very much.
So just on a comparative basis, if you take a look at last year, what we budgeted commodities at on the water side, we budgeted at 267. We're saying that we think we're going to end the year about 242. Last year we budgeted 162 plus or minus, and we think we're going to end the year at 150. Total and combined basis, we think we're going to finish at about 392,000. This next year's projection, we just try to keep it moderately within that range using just a small inflation factor. So, our total request on the water side looks like it's around 247,000, sewer side 172,000 plus or minus, and totaling up at about 419,000 compared to the projected of 392. So I guess that's $26,000 over what we think we're going to end up this year. There may be some room to work on that. I don't know, but I'll put a little asterisk by that for the time being. So that, anybody got any questions about any of the professional services and commodity expenses that are projected? Okay, so if not, let's move on to maintenance expenses. That's the 300 series of accounts, and it's one that's always pretty significant, but not over. So on the maintenance expense outside labor, that's kind of a wild card thing that varies a lot. I guess going into this year's budget with us upping our staffing, I talked to Silas and I said, Silas, you know, we need to really try to maximize what we're doing with our personnel and our resources here and not just outright say we're going to outsource something every time we have a problem. So that's going to be the theme this year to try to keep costs under control. He's done a pretty decent job of that last year, in my opinion. So when you take a look at that maintenance on expense on outside labor, maybe we can talk about that for a minute. But on the water side of it, we've historically budgeted around $78,000-80,000, and the two things that are big in that are always we've got a well cleaning deal going on that gets booked under that item, and then we've got our elevated storage tank that we deal with that we got a contract, and that hovers around $22,000 a year. So those are, if you take a $20,000 well cleaning and a $22,000 tank contract out of that, you don't have a whole lot to deal with any kind of emergency repairs. But that's what's built into that line item. And so on the sewer side here of recent years, we've been doing quite a bit of root treatment, and I think it's been effective. We've not, with the exception of one small event with Rennie and Merlin Rice residents, we had a little bit of wastewater clogged up in a sewers on the backside of Linden Street. But other than that, it seems to be working pretty well. You guys know one of those events, end up costing you quite a bit of money, through your insurance or through just cash outlays to the bank. So that said, this year's budget request, on the water side, I'm trying to when I looked at it, that's just as low as I could possibly think. It's probably too low, but I proposed a number of $5,000 on the water side of it and $30,000 on the sewer side. The next item, the 302 category, is for really parts and materials, and that's the one that, any repairs that we make, they come through that account. And this year we're projecting an expense there of about $55,000, and so on the budget I'm saying $59,000. And if you look historically, you can see that's significantly less, both of those line items, than what was asked for the previous year. So we'll just have to see how that runs. But the tools deal, the next line item 303 is just really hand tools, and we try to keep it in line if where we're projecting, or in between what we previously budgeted. But we do have failures on hand tools, and we have lost too, and we periodically have to make those replacements. That's where that comes out of. And
What's the difference between that tools and the 520 tools?
for the 520 or your heavy equipment, specialized equipment, and like, for example, a sewer camera, or a welder or something like that, whereas the tools in the 303 account are more like hand tools, shovel, drill, socket, wrench, things like that nature. So
Okay, so it's like a small
Yeah.
expense, large expense. Okay, that's fine.
Yeah. So that 303 sludge removal expense, I blanked that out, because if we're doing any of that, and I do have some of that in the budget and on an amortized basis, we're just assuming we're going to amortize the expense at $50,000 a year. But that's elsewhere. We'll make mention of that when we get there. 309 is a maintenance expense for vehicles, and again, we're just projecting it based on what we've incurred here before. 340 transportation is for fuel, and it's basically a projection of what it's been here the last couple of years. 350 is office supplies and postage. As you can see there, it's a similar projection as to what we've been incurring. I know the Postal Service is looking at a pretty substantial increase, is what I'm hearing, but I don't know that. We don't know right now. We'll just have to deal with that. And then the miscellaneous is for those things that really don't fall into any category. And then the final one, tools and work equipment are like the trailers, that carries equipment, the rotting machines, the tapping machines, and those type of things. And, here of recent, we've been itemizing, asking for quite a bit, and we have acquired quite a bit. We tried to moderate that in this budget projection. So that said, when you take a look at our requests this year, we're, just rounding to real round numbers. We're projecting the expenditure about 193,000, and this year's request is about 197. And that for the budget that was approved this year, that request was pretty much in line with what it had been probably the last 2 or 3 years, 263,000. So we're trying to cut back on that, not asking, any more, and hopefully we can make that work. And all of those cost centers, I tried to do the best I could do to try to hold those expenses down. So after going through that, the next slide that we're going to look at is the income expense summary for the system. And so that's, if you'll pull that slide up there. So make sure I got my right slide. Okay, so those items that we went through up there were really, our operating expenses. So let's talk about our non-operating expenses right now. And that's primarily interest and amortization. In that table that's in front of you is simply a schedule of that as it exists today. Those are the debt issues that we have active. Now, the one thing that I would tell you that I haven't addressed in there, and we're going to need to talk about that, and that's the line of money that the city's provided us. And we've drawn that down to, we've used up $418,000 roughly. I think maybe it's 413,000, but somewhere in that area of $1 million that the council had discussed that they make available to us. And we're going to have to somewhere define the payment strategy back on that. And, it needs to be pretty quick, I would say, somewhere on the line of 5 years, or, certainly no more than 10. But we probably need to define that somewhere in this budget, or have an idea of how we're going to do that. You'll see here a little bit later, some of these projects are going to require us to draw on that unless we line up some financing outside. So that's something that we can do. But that table pretty much speaks for itself. So anybody got questions for that? That's based on schedule that Glenda built.
The other thing we might wanted to do, Roger, I know we would need to pay them some principal back, but if we're not able to pay them any principal back, we might ought to look at about 12,000 a year interest on that 400,000 to the city.
Yeah, I mean, I think what we need to do is just maybe sit down with John and the mayor and just get an idea of what everybody would agree to there.
Right.
Just the way I look at that, and we're going to talk about it here in a minute. Of course, here over the last several years, our cost of living increases have been, adequate to keep us floating along. We've done quite a bit of major capital projects. When you guys look at the trial balance sheet, you'll see where we've spewed out some cash here over the last several years on building this wastewater plant, that sewer rehab, and some of these other things. But we've kind of burnt that all up, and we're down to the point now where we're in the borrowing mode, and for most of our major capital projects, and that's not going to change for this foreseeable future. If we continue to do these projects, so that's something that we'll need to consider. on how we deal with that. I don't think that's a bad thing, particularly in a low interest rate environment. You know, when you get into a higher interest rate environment, you know, it may change your philosophy on that.
Right.
So Blair, let's go to the next table if no one has any questions there. And this one starts to kind of summarize things up and similar to audit terms. So, you know, on the first line in that table, we talk about our total revenues that came off of that first table we talked about a while ago. You take those three cost categories that we discussed: personnel expenses, professional services, commodities, and maintenance. And that's how we derive the total operating expenses. And out, you see that line item titled operating income. And then, so that can show you, you know, what you've got to operate on before you have to start dealing with your debt and cash flowing things. Normally on most income statements, to determine your net income from your operating income, subtract your non-operating expense, which is the table we just talked about, the interest and administrative fees on our debt we have. And then we subtract out our depreciation and amortization. And that's a big thing. You can see that number's increased or continues to increase, and it will, you know, as we continue to add plant more rapidly to the system, then we're taking it out. I expect the depreciation number to go up, but the reality of it is you got to generate more cash to help pay that additional debt that you're going to have to service. So that's the thought process, and I think we've been fortunate to balance those, you know, recent history. So probably a continuing trend. But anybody got any questions? So we're showing, you know, it's kind of alarming on the end line there. I made a comment in that management report to you that, you know, from a manager's perspective, I would love to balance the budget every year. I would, and we've not done that in a while. And this is another proposed deficit budget when you look at the net income down there. And so the only way to rectify that would be to cut expenses or increase revenues. And I don't know, you know, we've been underwater on the sewer system for a while. Gosh, I've been around the utility here for, I know, 30 years, and I don't ever remember them balancing the budget on the sewer system. They've always used water revenues to offset, you know, anything they were underwater on sewers. That's what we got. We can go back to that and talk about it in a few minutes. From there, usually we'll go in and get into the debt. So the next slide is the existing long-term debt. Let me make sure that I'm. So you kind of lose track of these things sometimes when you put all these numbers together, and I see maybe where I did that, but we'll talk about that existing debt expense. I've probably have that repeated here. I know that Dan asked me to take a look at the principal remaining and retirement dates for our long-term debt. And I've got another table right now.
Go to the next screen, Roger.
Yeah. Won't you? Yeah, let's look at that first just for a minute, and then we'll go back. So that's what I.
Yeah.
So you can see, you know, the debt that we have right now that we've got on the books, and the first one, it says GWST is the groundwater storage tank, and we owe $180,000 on that, and it will be set to mature in October 2021. The principal payment during this particular budget year that we're budgeting for now is $120,000. The city has been gracious over the years, and it's grown the water system 100,000 every year to basically cover that debt service payment on that. So that's that item is one. This year we're going to be, 20,000 over that to take care of. It's going to have to come out of cash. The next item's at Cypress Lakes Recovery Act project that was done in the latter part of the previous decade, and or 2010, I think, is when we actually signed the note. You see the maturity date on that's December 2031. Right now, principal amount outstanding on that's 295,000, which is pretty amazing. There was quite a bit of that project was grant funded. We actually had the Riverport project in there, and that Cypress Lake project, and then the Cypress Lake going. Both of those. Then we had some grant funds all tied up in that made it all work. So the next line item is the Cypress and Chestnut project. That was the first one we had to borrow on the Heights area. It was actually the third project that we did in the Heights area. Elder and Elm Street were both taken out of cash reserves, paid off without borrowing. And then you got Cherry and Cedar, which we're getting ready to finalize that loan agreement right now and wrap it up. And then I'll put in the general fund allocation provided by the city and what we've drawn out today. So that's a picture of how our long-term debt. There is a typo problem with that sewer total column. It should include that $418,000, and it doesn't, but I think the totals over there are correct. So I'll have to fix that.
So we're servicing this debt with about 180,000 this year out of the 1.77 million we owe.
Yeah.
What I'm hearing.
Yeah. That's what it means. When you get back to go, if you can, Blair, go back to that previous tape.
We're servicing everything with that last 418,000 is what I'm hearing. That's
right. And that's the point that, we need to try to, figure out how we're going to do that. It's going to, I can just tell you, we're going to have to enhance, make it happen. So.
Question on the slide then before it. On the, two before that one.
The income and expense summary.
Yeah, on the depreciation and amortization then, is that all, what fraction of that is actually money paid out? Is that only the, let me go back. Is that just gonna be the 181,200?
181,200. Okay, so yeah, I would tell you that the way it works, your income expense statement generally in the audit will report depreciation and amortization as an expense, but it's really a book entry, and we charge it as against operations, and we do that because that's a way to the way to, I'm looking for the word here, to make up for the cost of paying for infrastructure, whether you cash flow it or whether you finance it. So that's why on that income expense summary, we subtract it out to see the net income, but you'll see here in a minute on another table where we put that in, we'll add it right back up to the operating income, which we call cash generated by operations. We'll add back that depreciation and amortization, and then all of those capital improvements and debt service payments come out of that.
Yeah, that depreciation just gets confusing at times.
The only thing I would tell you, Paul, on depreciation and amortization is if you'll look at that sewer number, it says 325,000. Well, that includes a $50,000 number for taking care of that expense of disposing of all of those solids there. And so what I would tell you is that 50,000 is going back in there to replenish that cash that we blew, dealing with dredging of solids and stuff. every year. That's just a way to recompensate the cash for that expense that was cash flowed out.
Okay.
So, you take your existing debt expense, which Bill, you're right, 181, 200 roughly to cover this budget year to just the debt that we got on the books, the principal part of the debt on the books. And then we get down to Blair, this table, cash, well,
Go to the last slide, I think it is cash flow summary.
I want to wait on it. Let's talk about some other things here, and then we'll get to that cash flow table, and I'll explain all of it. But let's talk about capital improvements for a minute. So the water capital plan, I gave that to you again last meeting, and it's based on what the water committee had thought appropriate for the priorities, and that's how that got compiled. And so this year we're showing work in the well field, meter replacements, about half of those on this fiscal year, and I'll put half of them over the next fiscal year. SCADA improvements that we desperately need to take care of some out-of-date technology that has frequency failure issues that result in high labor costs responding to it, and then continuing the study on the new water plant, and then this money for Lone Valley Road extension that was projected. And we'll talk about that later on too. But total capital project $729,000. So you can go back and look at the depreciation number on that other table, and you see on the water side of it, right now we're depreciating only 265,000. So our expenditures are outrunning, what we're getting back on the depreciation of booked assets. So it's kind of that state of where we're at, trying to replace infrastructure. But then let's go to the sewer system capital plan, if you don't mind, Blair. Okay, this one's somewhat similar in that, our priority projects. That first one, that TriMac lift station rehabilitation, a couple of comments on it. I think that we're probably going to get that built for less than that, but that's kind of, I prepared a contract style estimate on that, but I plan on doing that in-house. And we talked with the TriMac people, and we told them that we'd expect for them to pay at least half of that. So they're going to allocate $38,000 by agreement to compensate us. And I'm hoping that we can build that thing out for probably less than 50 doing it ourselves. That's a relatively shallow lift station. We're going to reconfigure some pumps, and they're suction lift pumps, so they're not that difficult to deal with. The next project's the wild card here, and that's for this wastewater plant. And I want to try to ride hard on it. I tell you, it just feels like that whole deal, that's way too much money to spend on that project to me. But I've seen the numbers that are projected and all that. And so I would say that, from our perspective, that we need to be real diligent during the engineering phase and ride hard on what's going on. They're in a process of writing up a preliminary report on this, and I need to make sure that we talk about it as a board as to what our expectations are. I know that I would like to try to utilize that existing lift station we have down there for like the high flow element of that, and then just build a little lower flow lift station for normal flow. And hopefully that could help keep some of that expense under control. And then we'll just have to see. I mean, the total amount of that project project is $2,995,000. That's just a lot of money. I think we've already spent about $1.5 million probably on our wastewater plant to get us to where we're at. So that said, we'll move on to the next one. And the reality of that one is we talked about that as a committee there, and I went ahead and threw some dollars at it. But I would address those costs through that amortization fee. We'll just have to see on what we can do there. You know, that time is on our side there. I don't like hauling water around, and those solids continue to dry out. They're going to dry out a bunch this year. I can tell you that we lost a lot of volume out of those bags just the years that we've had them out there. So longer that we can hold off on doing a whole lot with that, the better off we be, I think. They are unsightly around the facility, but it just, maybe that's the price we pay. And then the other one's a sanitary sewer rehab project that goes in line with what we've been doing. That one probably be directed towards Camelot subdivision. If there's anything that we needed to, or we could delay, we could probably delay that one this year with all that other stuff going on with that wastewater plant. And if we did that, it might help some of the funding. So that said, we can go over to that cash flow summary table that's up on the screen and start talking about that a little bit on how that works. You know. So the net income line is strictly from that other table that we talked about, the income expense summary, and just copied that in there, and that gives us that table. And then the below that, we just add back in the depreciation. Now on that, when I added that depreciation back on the sewer, I deleted that amortization cost for that sludge. I didn't add that back in there because I figured that was gone. We've already spent that, and I didn't put it back in there. So you can see that next line is what we call cash from operating activities. And we're not even really generating any cash at all off the sewer system since we've got such a deficit. And so on a combined basis, we are generating $364,650. And then we go down there and we put in line some other sources of funding. That first line item, the historical contribution from the city for the groundwater storage tank at $100,000. And then the next line item is $75,000 plus left on the report being done. And again, that's another one that we talked to the city about. I think they agreed to do that back in a council meeting here last year. I got John on the line. I know he's cringing over. It's got to be, because he's got a tough budget picture himself going on here. So that's what we got. The other thing here, we're just looking at proceeds from other loans or from that city line of credit. And that number right there is just what it took to balance things out as we had them projected with those capital improvements in our existing debt. This item, I call it the construction and contributions in aid of construction. And I show 42,000, 38,000. The 42,000 would be to cover the direct expense on the Lone Valley deal, and the sewer one was showing 38,000. That's the allocation for the TriMac people on the TriMac lift station. And then the next line item would be loan proceeds from the new Clean Water State Revolving Fund loan that we've been tentatively approved for, getting approval, official board approval. So you can see there the total funds for loans and grants, and then we derive the number that's available to fund what we got planned for existing debt and for capital improvements. And if you look at the total capital projects number and the cash available, well, they balance, and that's the funding plan on how the money flows here. I would tell you that the line of credit left on that $1 million is only 582. If you look at that number, we're projecting 692, which is another $110,000 outside of that. So that's upside down there. And that's why I made mention of maybe you delay that sanitary sewer rehab project over Camelot until you can find out more. I mean, a couple of big wild cards that we've got in my mind from an engineering standpoint is what are you really looking at spending on the wastewater plant to get that finished up and get out from under that agreed order. That's a wild card. And then the next one is, okay, what are you gonna do about this water plant? What are you gonna do? How much you gonna spend? Where are you gonna put it? What processes are you gonna put into it? And those are things that we're really not gonna know until we have the preliminary engineering report. And, we need to spend quite a bit of time on that, get some clarity. And until then, try to be as conservative as we can be. And once those numbers we become aware of what kind of real cash outlays we need to have, then we need to really make some strong projections, for a period of 10 years down the road for this utility on what your revenue requirements are going to be and what your rates are going to have to be to satisfy all that. Anybody got any questions? I know there's a lot of info in here, lots of info.
Roger,
Yes, ma'am.
I know you've probably told us, but where you said new truck for
Yes.
water
Yeah.
and for sewer, would you go with that, please?
Yeah, vehicle replacement plan. So this year in the vehicle replacement plan, we budgeted $104,000. And so the two needs are, we have a service truck that has the crane on it, the winch on it. And that truck's a 2008 model, and it's got motor problems, and it's time to replace it. And we're wanting to replace it with a new service body, to basically a 2-ton truck with a large 1.5-ton crane on it that'll lift all of our pumps. That's one truck. And right now I'm considering that coming out of this year's budget. We had that budgeted plus another 3/4-ton pickup, 4-wheel drive pickup to replace one of the fleet pickup trucks. And we've got, right now we're driving in the fleet. We got a 2001 Ford, a 2004 Chevrolet, and a 2005 Chevrolet. So they're basically replacements, upgrading units that are, really beyond their design life. So that's what we're asking for there.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Roger, this is Steve. I have a question that may be a dumb question. Do we use the same calculation on the cost of living adjustment for salaries that we do on water service raises?
No, Steve, we don't. What we have been using on the CPI for adjusting our rates annually is based on an infrastructure index, the cost of building water, sewer, and then solid waste infrastructure. And, used to, we did use the standard urban consumer price index, but it really, we looked at it for several years and it just wasn't yielding what was reflective of the cost structure that we were seeing that were driving the utility. So no, we don't. That COLA at 2.3% was probably similar to what it was last year. I don't remember the exact number. It seemed like it was 2%, something like that. And then the number that actually got built into the rates was a little over 3% based on that other CPI index for infrastructure. I mean, it's not radically different, but it, was meant to be more reflective of the total cost of the operation. So, and it, when you take a look at the revenues that have been generated and the rate structure, that thing's been healthy. I mean, it's kept us good. And we're not out, just spending money to be spending money. We've had some deals that we had to spend a lot of money on to take care of. When we got into that wastewater plant project, it's bare. It still is a bear. So.
Yeah, that's CPI.
Yeah, I was just asking because I think it wouldn't be counterproductive if our rates of increases on payrolls and different was more than the rate to the customer. So that's what I was trying to figure out.
Generally going to be lower.
Yeah, see that CPI that we use for that relates to garbage, relates to water and sewer and utilities, and it's determined more directly on the construction cost and the things that relates to improving sewer system and improving water systems, where the CPI they're using for the wages is more broad spread over a whole lot of things, which tends to pull it down to a lower increase. So that's the reason we switched to that. And it's been generating at about 3.5% since we went to it. So.
Good, good.
Any more questions on the budget that we put together here? Any recommended changes or suggestions or?
Well, just going back to the debt servicing to debt ratio. So we're roughly at 10% of addressing our debt. Or you could think of it, I guess, over a 10-year period, or, you know, however you want to do it, all except for what the city has allotted us. Is this in line with what we've done before? Is that growing, that ratio of servicing debt? Is it getting smaller compared to our actual debt? How, I know we look at cash flow or our cash balances every month, but I think this is one that we must consider too. Is one of those signs of, are we keeping up with our expenses given our revenues?
So here's how I would answer that. Historically, we've done that, but I've got some concern that we're getting towards the upper end of that range. You know, normally you're going to want your debt to not exceed a certain ratio of the debt over net income. And so you're getting ready to get a real good test on that. KIA's got our last audit. I got sent to them the 2019 audit. And they're going to look at that in terms of us incurring in a debt. They're going to come back to us and tell us, you know, basically what we'll have to do to support that loan if we decide to take that loan like that. So the picture, you know, over the last 10 years or so, I would answer is yeah, you're increasing the debt at a pretty steady pace. And that's the, we do have to watch that and keep those ratios in line. So.
Well,
I
I
think-
understand. I mean, I know we have some huge capital projects. It's time. You got to deal with the big issues. And so I know it's going to go up at times. But like I say, if our city doesn't grow, then it really gets down to what are our resources for servicing all that. And so, I mean, that's where we have to look, I suppose, at rate increases. I see where to me, this year, you really tried to, especially in the maintenance budget, really keep it really thin. You know, I see you trying to keep expenses down. I hope some of these meters and things will help. That new meter system will help increase revenue just by catching the I&I and whatever. But
I would say, Bill, that, you know, it's noticeable that we have a reduced maintenance burden in the area where we've replaced the water mains. In that Heights area, the maintenance burden has radically been reduced. And, you know, that's the philosophy for, you know, the replacement of the infrastructure around town. From a board perspective, thing you got to be sensitive about, and I'm sure everybody is, I know we all are, is, you know, where do your rates go? And so you want to be competitive. We're coining ourselves as the place for the baby boomers to, you know, retire at. That this is the ideal place. And part of that mantra is that we have a low cost of living. We don't want to see that get out of whack. Now, right now, you know, our water and sewer bills are pretty nicely in line with the lower end of the state, but that's going to gradually change as you move forward. You know, the rest of the news is everybody's encountering these problems. And if you're not raising your rates, you're being negligent. It's going to catch up with you. And, you know, our immediate neighbors are are suffering like we are. If you look at Benton, they've had to have several rate increases, and they're having to generate, a lot more revenue to take care of their agreed order issues they've got. And, the regulatory pressure is just not going to go away. One thing I could see here is, there may be some ability to kind of flatten out or more stabilize your labor costs down the road here possibly. And we can talk about those strategies down along. And then, I think the reduced labor burden and some of those things will help in some of these other areas. And then we will gain some efficiencies. You talk about replacing meters, you're going to get revenue out of it. 2012, when we replaced those big meters, we paid those off in 2 years completely. I mean, it was just with the revenue that we captured. But I tell you, in Calvert City, it's all about the industry. And, if they start having trouble, we got trouble. So we got to be really, really monitoring that situation. And you're going to have to take a lot of that in consideration when you approve, if you decide you're going to approve a big water plant project. We got to watch that. And we're going to need to have some assurances from those guys, or at least have some dialogue. They're going to be around for a while.
So we need a motion, I believe, to authorize Roger and myself to present this to the city as our proposed budget for the 2021 fiscal year.
So moved by Bill Koeneke.
Okay. I have a
Second by Steve Freeman.
Okay. All right, we have a motion and a second on that. Let me just make it easy on Zoom. Paul, where are you?
Yes.
Donna,
Yes.
Steve,
Yes.
Bill?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Motion passes, and Roger and I will clean up some issues here and present this to the city for them to include in their total budget like we do every year. So on the agenda, we had a line item to talk about the United Systems electronic payment and customer portal proposal. Reason we put that on the agenda was that's going to take some monthly expenditures, and so we just wanted to get that before you and let you know that that's going to take place already in operation. But I think it will save a lot of clerical time in the office and do a better job with our customers paying and so forth. So, Roger, you want to talk about that, or?
Yeah, I'll summarize it. Last meeting, we talked about the promotion that United Systems had for their customer portal software, combining it with the Next Bill folks. And I think everybody seemed to be in approval with that. And we were, wanting to proceed with that. There was one issue there that I became aware of, was integration of that with our counter receipts software and station here at Front Desk City Hall. I think it'd be important for us to get a card swiper there and integrate that whole software with the front desk on the counter receipts. And there's a cost for that. There's some hardware that we've got to buy and some modifications to the cash drawer. The card reader and the cash drawer combined, there's $1,320. And then there was about $700 estimated the budget for training on set up and helping the clerks learn how to use the system for that electronic payment. And we would like to move on with that. And what you're obligating to your annual obligation is going to be $1,255 for that customer portal. And, but I think, you know, from a PR standpoint, it will be good. We just got to get folks, to use it instead of, you know, calling all the time. Once they get used to using it, there'll be a cell phone app, all that good stuff, and you can access it pretty quickly. So, and you can make electronic payment through it and review your account as well. So that's, I wanted to clarify, make sure that everybody understood that we were gonna go ahead and put a credit card reader on the computer upstairs here and get that integrated in with our counter receipt. So you can make a credit card payment when you come to City Hall too.
Okay, everybody in agreement to proceed with that?
Yes,
Okay,
Yes,
okay.
Yep.
Okay. All right, we will proceed with that, Glenda and Roger, so moving on. One other item that's on the agenda that we need to talk about a little bit is and we talked about it in the budget, it was roughly $42,000 for the Lone Valley Road water line extension. Roger and I have talked about this extensively, and we believe that one of the way to help our cash flow issue is to get new customers. And this is one area that they have been asking for water for an extended period of time, different ones, and there's quite a few out in that area that could tap onto that. First round was roughly 7 houses. And there's would be some others once we get the line out there that could tap on as well. So we want to talk with you all about that line there. So Roger, did I cover that all right? You want to add to that?
Let me clarify that just a little bit. Of course, we got in our policy for extensions, the city can act as the developer and deal with that. And in this case, what we propose to do is act in that capacity. We'll do the engineering in-house. Really, the only expenditure that we'll incur is the cost of materials. And the best I can tell, the materials are going to be about $10,000 for that extension. And so how that would work is, I mentioned that US 62 sewer, we account for all the costs, and then we build in an assessment structure as people tie on to it. We cover our costs, both labor, material, and equipment, and, you know, to get recovery on that. And I think in time it'll work out. We'll recover all our costs and get the new customers in there. I think it's something that, you know, I'd like to try to do. 2 months ago, I didn't really have any idea how we were going to do, but we're out there putting a main in and down towards Possum Trot, and that project's gone pretty well. And the new boy that we've hired is a pretty good equipment operator, and they're working good together, and I really believe we can do something else. So that's the thought process.
We do
These
have,
customers are outside of Calvert City again.
It is.
Right.
General service territory. You know, that's our service territory.
Yeah.
So our service territory is basically everything north of I-24, with the exception of Old Givern'sville and down to Beach Street or Dr. Smith Lane, and then on west of the Possum Trot area, which is down at Cypress Creek and Von Chapel Road. But, you know, it's just one of those things where we just don't have water there, and there's several people living there. I think you can get some new customers, and I think everybody would benefit from the project.
And so you're saying this is Lone Valley Road north of 62 also, right?
up there where Kent Shortcut lived and up on that hill.
Yeah, we're sharing.
That sounds like south of 62.
And
Okay,
Michael lived up on the
Michael
hill.
Ford.
Yeah.
I got you.
So it would go, it's roughly, this particular segment's roughly 5,000 feet, I believe. if I'm not mistaken. I may be
How
wrong.
much, a outside the city customer, what's their typical bill?
Well, they pay 150% of what a city customer pays. So,
They don't pay
typical
sewer,
bill.
so.
yeah, well, their typical water bill is $42, $45, something like that for water.
Okay, so that, assuming it's $10,000, that would pay back in 32 months if it all went to that material.
So my hope would be is to set up that assessment fee that where we recover, most of that capital expense amongst those that tie onto the line. Now, you're not gonna get that back initially day one, but I know.
No.
Yeah, there would be like 7 people connect into that thing right out of the gate. So, our tap fees alone for out of the county are about $1,500, out of the city. Just on an assessment to that to cover the costs of the main, and that's the development fee. Paul, that's one of the things that we were talking about in the planning process. Is it's not fair for
$1,500 tap fee, that would give us $10,500 right there.
yeah. So it'd help us cash flow it. And then, the other part of it too, so here, I'll give you an example. I've got a guy that's calling me all the time, wanting to build a house on the corner over by Gary Smith. And he tells me it's going to cost him about $8,000 to $10,000 to drill a well. And we got talking numbers. I said, well, how much would you kick in towards water main? He basically said, I'll kick in $5,000 to get a water main line out there. So that's the kind of thing that you're dealing with. I don't know that that's uniform, but for new construction, the well cost is what it is. You can spend that much on drilling a well.
And also one of those 7 is
So,
that we've already talked to is having trouble with their wells, and they're gonna have to do something, either tie on to us or dig a well.
Okay.
I think they'll tie on, and before we would proceed with that, would get this guy or one of the others that live out there, or try to just round up who would tie in there on this thing. The county does not have a mandatory water connection, and so that is a killer. And to me, that's a deal killer. If you don't have them up front willing to tie on, you got to really look at that. We talked about that Highway 95 project that they built the 2020 program and ended up with 2 customers. Well, there's 20 people live down that road, from here to there, but we ended up with 2 customers. That's not good, that's not good business. We need them all, to agree on there. I think all the new ones that come in will tie in, no problem. It's just the ones that have got wells out there may be an issue.
so the project is going to help provide these 7 water and sewer?
No sewer.
Got
Yeah, no sewer.
And what's your experience? Would we never get them for sewer? More than likely?
Well, that more than likely not. And so I know there was some commentary from the city side of it before about sewering people outside of the city. And I don't think you do. I mean, I don't think you even try to, there's a density issue with sewer that you need to make it cost effective. We've had some requests for it, but it's just difficult. So it's a different cost structure.
Okay. Just asking, learning.
So here's what I would suggest. If everybody's good with that, let me try to get something formally together here. And I would like lay that line this summer.
Okay.
And I'm really thinking that we would, and I told y'all it was a mile, it's not a mile, it's around 1,100 feet is what it is. And I really think that we would be up there about 3 or 4 days laying that pipe. So you get 300 or 400 feet a day, most likely.
What size pipe you gonna put in up there?
SDR 21 PVC. £200.
Is it like, what's this diameter? Is this like the standard in the city for customers, 1 inch or
Yeah,
something?
this will be a 6-inch pipe. Now we'll put a 6-inch in here.
Okay, I'd say go ahead and work something up, Roger, and we can continue this conversation with a few more facts and what you can come up with.
I'll try to bring something back to the board there, regular meeting next month.
Okay. All right, one
So
last
the other item on
these
there
service trucks
is,
that Roger talked about.
Yeah, I've got to get moving on those trucks. Our fleet is in quite a bit of duress. That one 2008 model truck it's got a bad motor on it and we're limping around in that thing and I got to move forward. So I've looked at the state contract and what we think, the need for that service bodies and the F550 style truck, and with the things that we need on it, that under state contract, it'd be about $37,775 for the chassis. That doesn't include the service body bed. I've estimated the service body bed and the crane to go on that would be another $36,200 to get that rigged up like it is. That's a pretty solid truck. It should last the utility, another 12 years or so. And the other truck that we want to buy is an F250 truck. The reason we want to buy an F250 4-wheel drive is we won't be able to use it to pull around our excavator when we need to pull it around in addition to the other trucks that we got. But again, under state contract there, the value of that truck's about $32,620. And what I'd like for the board to consider here is give us to proceed approval to proceed on getting these 2 chassis lined up, and then maybe we'll put that service body over into the following budget. Somehow or another work that over the course of these 2 fiscal years. I don't have any other equipment replacements that we're asking for right now. We just need to get on those 2 things. I've been told that if you place an order today, it may be September before you get delivery on a truck because the factory shut down. And it may be what it is, but Dan and I talked about it. State contract, if we buy under it, it has been procured properly. And I was going to talk to local dealers and see if any of them here could be in a mode to honor that price or lower. If they are, we try to do business here locally, at least give them a shot to do it.
Okay, can I have a motion to proceed with the purchase of these 2 vehicles?
I make a motion to proceed
that
with the
motion.
So
new
moved.
vehicles.
Okay, I've got 2 motions and 2 seconds, I think. So I think it has motion passed. All in
Yeah.
favor, say aye. Okay.
Aye.
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 All right. That pretty well gets you taken care of there, Roger, to go ahead and get some numbers together and proceed on that. So. All right.
I'll do that, Dan. I want to
Any other?
extend my appreciation. Yeah, I appreciate the board. This is a lot of information to try to get together at one time, and I appreciate you guys working with us, and we're gonna try to be diligent as we can, keep this thing going, and it's gonna be a challenging time, and I will tell you this, we'll try to operate on a monthly basis here, not get wild, and you know, if we have to pull back, we'll have to pull back. If we've got to discuss contingencies, if our revenues just fall to nothing, you know, we'll be prepared to discuss some things that, you know, where we could get to a bare bones operation. We just, none of us know, and we'll do the best we can do, you know, to manage it. So I'll keep you apprised as we're moving along the process on what our revenues are looking like and how our expenditures are going. So thank you.
Appreciate your efforts.
Anything else from anybody?
I believe I'm good.
Okay,
I'm good.
motion to adjourn?
I make a motion, we adjourn.
Did I have a
I'll
second?
second.
Okay. All right, all in favor, say aye.
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 Thank you all. Thank you. Good to see you.
Thank
Good to see you. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Have a good.
Bye-bye all.
Bye.